Good morning, good morning. Oh man, hey, huge good morning, Southern Nevada. It's good to see you. Welcome to the 41st Annual Las Vegas Perspective. I'm Jonas Peterson. I'm CEO of the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, and I could not be more excited to be your host this morning. I got to just say, it feels good to have everybody, our business community, back in the same room again, gathering, doesn't it? We are thrilled that you could join us in person. We are equally thrilled that another 450 attendees are joining us online this morning. That makes our audience one of the biggest perspective audiences in the history of this event. So thank you for making that successful. Yeah, this just feels great. This is one of my favorite events of the year because it's jam-packed with information. For those of you that are with us for the first time, the Las Vegas Perspective is Southern Nevada's premier source for community and economic development, information, analysis, and forecasting. That's what we're all about. Our theme this year, you can see it here, is all about Southern Nevada's next evolution. Moving from resilient to unstoppable. This morning we're going to be talking about disruption and change, innovation. You're going to be hearing possibly some new terms like Templosion. Look for that one. Along the way, we're going to be focused on how we as a community move forward together, how we get past recovery and really build the community that we know we can, that is unstoppable in Southern Nevada. Here's what we got planned. Just a teaser for the program this morning. It starts with our data book, the Perspective Market Overview. It's a comprehensive look at our market as it exists today. Whether you're in person or online, everybody gets a copy of the Perspective book. We have a powerhouse lineup of speakers this morning. You are going to love it. This is a treat. Beau Bernhardt from Unlv is going to be talking about the rebel cavalry that's coming to lead the charge and innovate our way out of the pandemic. Erica Orange from Future Hunters is going to be talking about trends that you need to know about that are going to be impacting our region. And then the one and only Jeremy Aguero is going to be closing out our keynotes in the way only he can, talking about our market and where we are going together. So, incredible program planned. All of this is made possible by one exceptional group, and that is our Perspective Council. Got to make sure I get all these recognitions right. So on the Perspective Council, this is the group that guides our speakers, how this event looks, and supports it in a really big way. On the council, you have Derek Hill and the team at Cox Communications. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being on the council. It's okay to applaud a little bit for these groups too. Cox is our pinnacle sponsor at LVGEA. I want to make sure I mention that. The team at Switch, Betsy Fretwell, our chairwoman. Thank you for being on the Perspective Council. Chris Way and the team at Channel 13 Action News. They have been with this community every step of the way as we've gone through a crazy past year. What an amazing force. We couldn't do it without you guys. Brian Formisano and the team at Wells Fargo. Huge thanks. They are joining us online this morning. So, hey, shout out to the team at Wells Fargo. Thank you for being on the council. Shannon Peterson, Terry Shirey, Nevada State Bank. Where are you guys at? Welcome. Good morning. Incredible partners to our community. Thank you so much for all you do. And then, of course, Applied Analysis. The entire team. This doesn't happen without them. Jeremy, Brian, Ashley, Rachel, that book you're looking at, this event. Hey, huge Thank you. We appreciate you guys. You deserve a lot of credit for making Perspective happen each and every year. All right, a few more groups. I want to recognize the board of directors at LVGEA. I think we have a handful in the room. If you're on the board, could you stand up and quickly be recognized? Members of the LVGEA 50? Awesome. This is a group that guides our regional economic development efforts in Southern Nevada. It's a powerful group. Couldn't be more thankful for their leadership. We also have a variety of elected officials with us this morning. Hey, if you're an elected official, could you please stand and be recognized as well? I saw a few. I know State Senator Ben Keffer. I saw Commissioner Jones with us, Mayor McManus, former Congresswoman Shelley Berkeley, Councilman Knutson, and Councilman Galt. I probably missed a few, but I want to say a huge thank you, and thank you for supporting regional economic development. If you are a sponsor, our PRISM, Periscope, or specialty sponsors, huge thank you. You really make this event possible as well. Thank you for supporting Perspective. All right, and then last but not least, the team at LVGEA. So if you are on LVGEA, please stand up. And many of them, I know we're still out checking people in, but hey, staff at LVGEA, please stand up. So this group, during the pandemic, has been moving mountains with passion, with dedication, and delivering results. We are now on track to deliver our highest level of assisted job creation with partners, with many of you that we've ever had as an organization, right at the time when this community needs it most. I'm so proud of that team. Man, they make me look good, and it has been a crazy year. Huge thank you. We've got a few of our team leads are here. Jared Smith, our COO. Jared? So Jared's our partner in everything we do. He's absolutely brilliant. Haven't been able to find something he can't do yet. Brooke Malone is new to the team, our Director of Investor Relations. Nobody better at getting you connected in Southern Nevada than Brooke. Brianna Benzoa is around here somewhere. She's in the back, really took the lead on making this event happen. There's so many more on that team at LVGEA that you know. Please thank them for all that they do. It's been an incredible year for the team. All right, so now the fun part of this event. We are going to get started with our keynote speakers. To help us introduce the first keynote, I want to welcome to the stage our chairwoman, Betsy Fretwell from Switch. And let me just say, we have the best chairwoman. We're maybe a little biased, but this is one of the strongest leaders we have in Southern Nevada. She just recently, I believe, was recognized with the Elaine Wynn Trailblazer Award. Yeah, thanks. Among many others, and is doing amazing things at LVGEA. Please help us give a big round of applause for Betsy Fretwell.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Jonas, thank you for that incredible kickoff to our event today. I do want to call out Commissioner Mike Naft, who was kind of left off that list. I'm really glad he's here this morning. And it's very unusual to see all of our elected officials actually be shy when they're recognized from the podium, but I think only a couple of them stood up, so I don't know what that's about, but get over the COVID thing and stand up. You guys are doing an incredible job, so thank you. I have the honor of introducing Beau Bernhardt this morning. Beau and I have been working on some pretty cool partnerships between LVGEA and UNLV over the last year or so. He has been newly appointed, although it's really not that new, to lead the economic development and diversity efforts for UNLV. Prior to that, you all probably knew that he worked in an inaugural position with the Gaming Institute at UNLV, and he came by that rightly because he has a PhD from UNLV, and he went to Harvard and got not one, but 2 majors while he was there in psychology and sociology. But he is widely recognized as an expert, and a lot of his research created the opportunity that paved the way, Mark Shear, for the Las Vegas Raiders to come here. So thanks to Beau and all of his research, we have an incredible kickoff weekend this weekend where we can all go and watch a football game. So yay, what a great way to start. The other thing you need to know about Beau is that he is widely recognized as an incredible speaker. So I'm going to put the pressure on him right now as I ask him to come join me up here on the stage. Beau has given over 300 presentations internationally to help spread the word about what UNLV is doing and his research. And so we are really pleased to have him here this morning to kick off this incredible event. Thank you all for being here today, and Beau, it's all yours.
Hi, everybody. There's so many familiar faces. This is so cool, right? To see each other, to hang out together. Yes, I think as Betsy indicated, last time I was up here, I had a different role. I now am very proudly serving our brilliant president. We have a special one now on Maryland Parkway in Keith Whitfield, where I get to oversee, among other things, a brand new tech park. It's called the Harry Reid Research and Technology Park. It's over by IKEA. Come see us, come join us. Several of you have already joined us, as you'll hear about. And what I'm about to show you, though, is something that I believe you've never seen before, and here's why I believe you've never seen it before. Because nobody on the planet has ever seen this before. Take a look. What you're about to see is planet Earth and humanity moving from a semiconducting world to a superconducting world. Moving from a world where everything is run by semiconductors, right? Semiconductors means sort of conducting, right? Conducting with loss of energy. And a Nobel Prize winner in 1910 proposed that someday it will be possible to superconduct, to send energy from point A to point B with no loss of energy in the process. Nobel Prize winners later on won the Nobel Prize for achieving that at temperatures only found in outer space, minus 400 degrees, because part of the challenge here is you lose heat, so you lose energy. So if you make it really, really cold, it's easier to do this superconducting thing. Well, this is a video image that, again, we haven't presented in public before, but that took place not at Oxford, not at Caltech, not in Palo Alto. This is on Maryland Parkway, where room temperature superconducting, the capacity to send energy from point A to point B in devices ranging from your telephone to your Tesla, happened for the first time in the history of humanity. This is what UNLV is today. And I'll overshare a bit. I've been at UNLV a long time. I've been at UNLV longer than I've technically been alive. Here comes the oversharing part. Because I was in my mother's womb in Tonopah Hall when my mother and my father, married at the time, were overseeing Southern Nevada's first ever upward bound program. That's how long I've been at UNLV. And let me tell you about UNLV and Ash Salamat, the scientist who achieved this on Maryland Parkway. Those kinds of folks didn't hang out at UNLV back in the day. We have a UNLV for you that is mind-blowing. You know how they used to hire at UNLV? Like when I first got there 25 years ago, they hired people like me. And this isn't false humility. The kinds of folks we were attracting. Ash left Harvard's physics labs, having been a top student in England, to come here because the DOE and the toys that the DOE had allowed him to achieve something that planet Earth has never seen before. And maybe, just maybe, leads to an entirely new kind of industry revolution that we'll talk about here today. So, you saw this, right? You remember when the New York Times said this? Las Vegas, ground zero for the COVID economic crisis. Well, here is our cavalry. What we have built is what we're calling an innovation super cycle. Atop that screen is Ash Salamat's team. And Ash Salamat's there, he's the grinning guy in glasses, very proud of all of those kids, I can say kids because I've been at UNLV for a long time, all these brilliant students. And you know what's awesome about that photograph? Every single one of those kids, Clark County School District. Except for Jasmine on the far left there. Jasmine's from Salt Lake City. Way to ruin the story, Jasmine. But when Senator Chris Brooks toured the room where it happened, there is literally a lab that tens of thousands of students walk by under normal circumstances every day. Just last week, you know what Jasmine said to Chris Brooks, our senator who, of course, leads in so many different ways in the state of Nevada? She told Chris, this is the one place where I could do this. I can't do this at MIT. MIT is not doing this. So here's our cycle. Jasmine and Ash and our Clark County School District team start with discovery on campus. They then move to a brand new, yet to be announced, and I'm announcing here today, incubator that we're calling UNLV Inc. UNLV's incubator is going to be housed, thanks to the generosity of the Hughes Center, at the ground floor of that gorgeous facility you're probably all familiar with. And then, hopefully, when they get to an LLC, they go from the incubator to our accelerator, our tech hub, our tech park at Blackfire. I'll talk about that in a moment. Then, hopefully, they invent the next great thing, and then we hope they come back and give back to the university, of course, and mentor the next generation in this beautiful cycle that really only happens in education, takes place once more over on Maryland Parkway. So let's talk a little bit about what this means. This could mean that Nevada could be a totally different kind of bright city, right? If we could finally create a new way to send energy. Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley because of the silicon, right? This material that enables the video that you just saw enables superconducting to happen. Let me give you a sense, a proportion, and background here. I was with Ash, who've become good friends. He's a British guy, and he's a Premier League guy, therefore. I'm a soccer guy. I kicked a soccer ball around for many years. So we were at a pub, as one is, to watch a Premier League game, and he got a phone call. And while I can't name the company, whatever Fortune 20 tech company you're thinking of, it's right. It's that company, or it's one of those companies. And they said, look, and he did the thing where he put the phone down, as we all do now. We were outdoors at the pub. We were masked up. We were, careful. But he pushed the speaker button. And they said, you know what? We actually have a top secret team here at who for 15 years, in a way that's only been known by the C-suite, have been working on room temperature superconducting. How the hell did you pull this off? And Ash, who's a scientist, but he's smart enough to know this, he said, well, I can't tell you that. But this was cool. I was proud of him. How are you trying to do it? And then they started to speak Greek. I had no idea, right? They just started to talk the talk. And he pushes mute on the button, and he turns to me and he says, they're nowhere near it. Only because he's a British guy and we were having a few pints and watching the Premier League, he dropped a few choice expletives in between. They're nowhere near it, right? This is the thing that's happening, again, at UNLV in a way that couldn't have been the case not too long ago. This is the description, right, of what we saw. In 2003, the Nobel Prize winner said there's only a few big things left. And again, in this write-up, which happened to come from Median, this list included exotic phenomena like dark matter, controlled nuclear fusion, most of which still seem very far-fetched. However, in 2020, one of his top of the list items appears to have materialized, and boom, there's Ash. Holy grail sought for more than a century. Researchers synthesized room temperature superconducting material. There's Ash at Maryland Parkway. New York Times, upper left-hand corner. Finally, the world's first room temperature superconducting. There's the BBC. Everybody talked about it, but you know what the problem was? This scientific achievement happened at almost the exact same time, at least the public release of it, that those doggone vaccine things came out in the science world and got a little bit of attention, rightfully so. And I'm afraid actually it got lost in the mix because again, this is the kind of transformative science moment that were we not in another kind of scientific moment would have been, late night talk show material, right? Would have really been something that took off. Nevertheless, we're building upon this foundation here. Here are some of the accolades. This was the cover of Nature. And you know what's cool about this goofy academic rivalry? There's Science, so Science magazine is there, named it the Breakthrough of the Year. There's Nature, Nature's cover story, right? If you make the cover of Nature, this has never happened in the history of UNLV. This doesn't happen to most scientists in their life, right? That this happens. Science and Nature hate each other. It's the nerdiest fight you've ever heard of, right? But it's academe, right? These folks hate each other. And yet Science also called this the Breakthrough of the Year, swallowing their pride, and even though it was released as a cover story in Nature last fall, admitting that this was in fact that. Time 100 Next, you've seen these, right? That's who ASH is, that's who these folks are. Physics World Top 10 Breakthrough, I'm sure you show up to that award ceremony every year, right? You look forward to that one like the Oscars, right? This was also one of those. And to put this in broader perspective, again, throughout history, right, throughout business history, recent business history in the US, the largest companies in the world have been in this business of moving energy from point A to point B with no loss of energy or less loss of energy or more efficient energy transmission. This moves us from a semiconducting world, which is what all of those things were, into a superconducting world. Imagine, if you will, as Governor Sisolak did in his State of the State, talking about this, storing a whole bunch of energy from all sorts of, let's say we just coat all of central Nevada with solar energy. The problem then is, of course, sending that energy. Let's say, just to imagine the unimaginable, let's say that at some point, Texas's energy grid shuts down. Just pretend, all right? ASH, with this silicon-like, Silicon 2.0 material, can send them the energy from central Nevada's solar energy and save Texas, and isn't that a happy day, right? When, again, I ask all of you that, like me, grew up in the Clark County School District, when did we ever have those kinds of moments? I've been trying to think of those kinds of moments when I was a kid, and some of you will probably have your own thoughts on what sort of discoveries or scientific achievements were close to that. Well, here's the only thing I can come up with. Growing up here, the only thing close to this level of great scientific leap forward, I think, was the stealth bomber, which happened, of course, at Nellis, or at least it was unveiled at Nellis, but it didn't really happen at Nellis, right? It happened all over the place. This happened here. Since then, and I'm a trained scientist, don't try this at home, there hasn't been a bigger scientific achievement that is ours, and it is proudly ours. And Ash wants to stay here, build his dream team, and send this out to a happy planet's worth of consumers. It'll be like the moment we switched to LED lights, because the moment that those lights were available, we could have an LED light bulb, it never made sense to use the old inefficient ones again, right? This is what's happening at UNLV. Coming soon, there we are, pouring out at the Unlv Incubator, out into the brand new, we're sort of transforming the Hughes Center from downtown Houston to Silicon Valley. We're creating over there a tenant park, all sorts of collision spaces, and at the hub of all of that is UNLV's brand new incubator. So if you are one of those brilliant students with an idea, here's where you go. And you lean on folks like AFWorks, the Air Force's innovation team, which is there. Boeing is there, right? All of the accountants and lawyers alike are in that facility, right? And can help our students build. At that point, you move to our showcase at the Harry Reid Research and Technology Park and Blackfire's Innovation Hub. When you get the LLC, when you need an office, here's where you come. And please take me up on this. All of you can follow me after the show to over by IKEA. And please take me up on this. Come tour Blackfire. It's nothing. So I see several of you have. It's like no university environment you've ever seen in your life. Certainly wasn't like that in my day. And here's what we're doing, and it's beautiful. We are extending the life of our most sacred relationship in academia. The most sacred thing we touch, the most sacred thing we do, is the relationship between student and university. It used to be that relationship ended after 4 years. Or longer for some of us, but that's okay, right? Not judging. And after 4 years, here's your diploma. We'll see ya, right? Now, after 4 years, we say, we're not done giving you stuff. Why don't you come to UNLV's incubator? That worked out really well. You're our best and brightest engineering student that won the senior design contest. Now you have an LLC. Move in to Blackfire. And let me show you what's happening at Blackfire today. This opened in the teeth of the COVID headwinds. We opened, we threw a party, Harry Reid showed up, Governor Sisolak showed up, everybody was, of course, very, very happy. And then we shut right down, right? And when I took over, we really were worried, right? Because commercial real estate, I don't know if anybody in here is aware, kind of rough right now. And there are existential questions about commercial real estate these days. As of today, we have 73 companies in Blackfire Innovation, UNLV's campus, where students and businesses interact in a way that was never possible when I was a kid, when I was in college, when I was in grad school. These 73 companies, President Whitfield asked me to calculate this, are worth a total of $1.134 trillion. And some of that's because Intel's there, right? And that's a $200 billion company, but most of it's not, right? And many of these companies, these are just some of them, of course, you'll notice don't have a massive Southern Nevada footprint. But when they see what university-driven ecosystems can provide, I get 15 seconds into this tour that all of you are hopefully joining me on later on, before folks say, I'm in. Where do I sign? How do I join? How do I become a part of this? And what we're building out there on roughly 100 acres is an innovation ecosystem built to last, built to be a cavalry, built to help innovate our way out of this particular historical moment. Here's some news items from just some of the companies. The AI Foundation, their motto is AI for good. Russ Logan is here somewhere. Raises $10 million to launch products that benefit humanity. Russ Logan, UNLV kid who went to Silicon Valley when he graduated from UNLV earlier last decade. Because of course you did, that's what you did when you were a smart kid like Russ Logan and you were in the tech world, you left, right? Now he has a home back in his home in Southern Nevada for his company, the AI Foundation, doing loads of good. Sightline, you might have heard, Bill Foley, owner of the Golden Knights, had invested $100 million. They are moving their headquarters downstairs from me. Again, on and on and on. These are the kinds of companies that are transforming not just our tech park, but hopefully our valley. So once more, there's the cycle. You start as a kid, again, these are kids from Mojave High School. These are kids from Bonanza High School. These are kids from Clark High School, right? Who then get to learn from Ash Salamat, the guy who's on the cover of Nature. And then, of course, hopefully, build and stay, and we have a place for them to stay, and then they stay. And pretty soon, that very sacred relationship that used to be 4 years is a 6-year, 8-year, 12-year, lifetime relationship. And that's where, of course, the multipliers really kick in. So I'll close with this. What's this game? 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. There we are, right? You can link anybody back to Kevin Bacon in the entire world of actors and actresses. Fun little parlor game that we've all probably engaged at some point or another. Here's where I think we're headed with UNLV as an engine. We're seeing 6 degrees or more of economic diversification. We're seeing something I continue to call degrees of economic diversification that I think will transform our valley, and here's why. Here's how it works with us, right? You have the Strip, right? And the Strip is an absolute behemoth and powerhouse. As executive director of the International Gaming Institute, that's a place that I know very, very well, and all of the ways in which it serves as an engine. But here's what it also does. It branches off into the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon game, right? The Raiders, my buddy Mark Shearer's here, are 1 degree of economic diversification away from the Strip, right? If you play the Kevin Bacon game. They are, of course, a company, and here's the great thing about the Raiders. The Raiders are one of the 10 most iconic brands in the Northern California economy that everybody's desperate to bring to Austin and to Orlando and everywhere else, right? And they were an iconic Northern California tax-paying brand that now are a Las Vegas and Nevada tax-paying brand. I mean, on that list of 10 most iconic global brands in Northern California are the Googles, right? Are the Apples, and probably the Raiders, right? And they're, of course, now here. Here's the thing about the Raiders. The Raiders are drawing heavily from, taking advantage of, leveraging the 150,000 hotel rooms, the brilliant infrastructure that brings 42 million people at our peak to Las Vegas through our transportation systems, right? Our great roads, our fabulous McCarran Airport, right? Harry Reid Airport. And that's one degree of economic differentiation or economic diversification, right? Because of course, the Raiders and the NFL are an entirely new multi-billion-dollar industry that wasn't here 10 minutes ago, right? So they're one degree of economic diversification away from the Strip. But here's the great thing about the Raiders living here. They actually take full advantage of a workforce that is brilliant at putting on spectacular events. Kind of a useful thing for Mark Shearer and friends, right? They actually are taking full advantage of the economic strengths, and they're not diversifying alone. They're not some seed we threw out in the middle of the desert hoping that it will grow, right, without water or an infrastructure, right? When you have degrees of economic diversification, you have law firms that know what the hell they're doing in this particular space. You have engineering firms and design firms and accounting firms, right? And so one degree of economic diversification is a diversification that is supercharged and empowered. But here's what happens after that. You then see a diversification into fields like sports medicine, which is 2 degrees of economic diversification away from the Strip. And from there you see things like robots, right? And med tech specifically. And med tech diversifies off from and out of course, sports medicine. At every step along the way, UNLV is there. UNLV has a world-class, you may have heard, hotel program. I'm a professor there, so I'm biased, but we do pretty good at the Strip thing. We now have the Sports Research and Innovation Institute just launched, thanks to, of course, the generosity and support of our sports industry. We have a little medical school that we opened. We were the largest city without a medical school. We now have this thriving medical school under Mark Kahn's leadership. We have a brilliant robotics and engineering and tech program under leaders like Rama Venkat and Paul O. At every step along the way, UNLV is there. And by the time you get to 4 degrees of Kevin Bacon, by the time you get to 4 degrees, 5 degrees, 6 degrees of diversification, you can't even see the Strip from there anymore. You've achieved diversification, but nobody's done it alone. Everybody's taken advantage of like half of an infrastructure designed perhaps for something else, but fully functional for a company like the Raiders. So in closing once more, my hope is that you think of us as your hometown university, right? You think of us as your 36,000 friends on Maryland Parkway. And that at every step along the economic diversification and development front, you think UNLV, go, fight, win. Thanks, guys.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Way. I'm the Vice President, General Manager of KTNV 13 Action News. Wasn't sure if the voice of God was going to introduce me, so happy to be here. So great to see so many friends and familiar faces. I just want to take a quick second to acknowledge Jonas and team, not only for getting us together here today and all the other events they put on throughout the year, but working with our state leaders, other organizations, all the leaders in this room, to go out and really market Nevada, to tell our story and bring businesses into Southern Nevada. A huge round of applause for you guys for all the work you do throughout the year. So I don't know about you, but I love living in Southern Nevada. I'm so proud to be here. It's so exciting. It's such an incredible energy, great dynamic. You know, every time we get knocked down, we come back stronger. This is true, right? Think about all the challenges we've had, whether it's a great recession after 9/11, through COVID. We always come back stronger through innovation, always looking towards the future. This is a cool thing about the Perspective event is we find out what the future looks like for us, what to be excited about, right? So, speaking of the future, so I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Erica Orange. She's the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Future Hunters, one of the world's leading futurist consulting firms. She evaluates emerging social, technological, economic, political, demographic, and environmental trends, and identifies the strategic implications, the quote, so what of those trends for several of the most influential Fortune 500 companies, trade associations, and public sector clients. She speaks to global audiences about the macro trends that are shaping and impacting today's landscape. She's spoken, of course, at TEDx, keynoted over 100 conferences around the world. She has also authored numerous articles and industry white papers, which have been featured in news outlets including NPR, New York Times, Time, Inc., Yahoo Singapore, WWD, Bloomberg, and CBS This Morning. Named by Forbes as one of the world's 50 top female futurists in 2020, please join me in welcoming Erica Orange to the stage. Erica.
Thank you so much. I put on real pants for you guys today. I'm so used to only being from the waist up. This is my first time traveling in about 18 months. This is crazy. And I got here, which was a feat in and of itself. Delays. I'm pumped up full of so much coffee, I forgot what it was to actually fly on an airplane. And part of me thinks that this actually would have been a more efficient way to get here. Granted, I have to say, this was me pre-COVID. I look a little bit like a baby pterodactyl flying through the sky. And obviously, I was terrified. Look at my face. I thought I was going to you-know-what myself. And it was risky. Yes, and I was scared. But when it came down to it, I knew I was still secure. I had the safety of a parachute. And when you think about the future, how many of us are almost terrified by the direction things are going? It's hard to navigate where the future is moving. But at the same time, we know that there are so many opportunities on the horizon that we're never going to fall. We are always secure. So one of the things, when I think about the future and the coming together of all of these macro trends, the one thing that it really boils down to is change. Change. And change in and of itself is not the new story today. Change has been with us since the beginning of human history. But what the new story is today is the pace of change. And that is what all of us collectively are going through. Because the future that we are moving into looks like this. We tend to think of the future as binary. We have trend, we have counter trend, and think of it as kind of a fork in the road. But that fork in the road now looks like this. And it's almost schizophrenic. We feel like we're losing our minds trying to go off in these multiple directions. But this is the reality now, because it's not just going to be about one future. It's going to be about multiple futures. And it's not just about one reality anymore. It's multiple realities. So the need to be adaptable and adaptive in this environment becomes more important than ever before. Now, one of the things, and when I was introduced, we were talking about the why and the so what. And that really is at the heart of what it is that I do. The why is contextualizing everything that we've been through, and then the so what is thinking of, what does all of it mean? When we kind of peel back the layers, what is the future actually telling us? So before I delve into some of the macro trends that we've been identifying, I want to rewind you guys back. And I want to rewind us back to around 2005, 2008. And what happened in 2008? Nothing? Nobody remembers? Nothing? The recession, the global recession. Yes, that upended and changed everything. And of course, in microeconomic terms, what we collectively were going through was, of course, a recession. But again, you peel back those layers and you look more deeply at what the economic environment was telling us. And when you look at it, you could tell that it was not just indicative of the boom and bust cycles that we are used to. It was telling a much more nuanced story. And that is the fact that what we were going through and continue to go through was not just a recession. It was a fundamental economic transformation. So if you look here at this timeline, we have been through similar transformations like this in the past. This isn't the first time, but we went from the agricultural economy to the industrial, to the post-industrial, to what in our shop in the mid-90s we were calling the immotile economy. It's kind of the information or the knowledge economy. And we felt a similar pain point right around probably 15 years ago. So what is the story that is being told here? The first story is that each economic transformation is brought on primarily by one thing, and that is the convergence of new technologies. So two things happen to these technologies. They become more commoditized, so they become cheaper, and then they become more democratized, so they get to be in the hands of more people. So new efficiencies are created in these economies such that we use technology in new ways, and then we employ people within those sectors in completely new ways. But one of the most disruptive things that happened back in around 2008 was that as we transformed this economy, people, human labor, was not reabsorbed back into the traditional workforce in traditional ways. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But what is the second key takeaway here? If you look here at this timeline, we went from tens of thousands of years to 250 years, to 50 years, to 25 years, to now just a matter of a few years. What's going on? The rapid truncation of time. Things are rapidly converging such that time in and of itself is something that can no longer be measured linearly or geometrically. Time is now something that is being measured exponentially and is being experienced simultaneously. So what do I even mean by that? Take someone today. In this environment, I can have one life and one persona in the real world, a completely different life and a completely different persona in the digital world, another life and another persona in the virtual world. And I would argue that definitions of success today and going into the future, particularly for younger generations, is going to be about the seamless interweaving of all of these different personas and realities. Because one of the things that's marking our economy today, and this is going to be kind of one of the more conceptual things I'm going to throw out at all of you, is that it is marked by a sense of boundarylessness. So we are seeing the coming together of all of these kind of disparate opposites. We are seeing a merging of the real and the virtual, the tangible, the intangible, even in some cases the biological and the technological, the analog, the digital, and increasingly that which is real and that which is fake, and that which is true and that which is false. All of these things are coming together and becoming more kind of blurred and blended. So one of the things that is marking every single economic model today and the growth of all of these new industries is time. Now, economists define a luxury as something that is in high demand and short supply. And if I were to ask all of you in your world what is in the highest of demand and shortest of supply, what would you say? Time. Time is always the number one answer, although I have to joke, it feels like a lifetime ago when I was standing up in front of actual people doing this. But I asked that question to an audience, and it was a very dark ballroom, and some guy in the back yells out, "Sex!" And I'm like, your problem, not mine. Maybe that's in high demand and short supply for you. But the answer more broadly is yes, time. And time, in many ways, is the new luxury value proposition. It is getting rapidly truncated, and we are experiencing it as if it were on steroids. Now, Jonas mentioned this at the very beginning. You might be hearing some new terms. And we love making up new terms, not because it's fun to do, which it is, but because it's my feeling that in order to really get the future right, and truly understand where it is moving, you cannot get stuck using existing vocabulary. You have to invent your own. So when we think of the rapid compression of time, Our term templosion is all around the implosion, the temporal implosion of time. And what this means, and this underpins everything, what this means is that the biggest of events, the biggest of things are happening in shorter and shorter periods of time. Now, economists predict that the average lifespan of a Fortune 500 company could be as little as 15 years. That's templosion. And one of the reasons for this is the rapid rise of startups, these kind of unicorn companies, many of which have little to no stated monetization strategy. There's a kind of push and pull between actual value and valuation out there in the marketplace, but they are coming out of left field and eating the lunch of the traditional incumbents, such that you have to be in a phase of constant reinvention. It's also changing everything we know from a generational perspective. This is one of the areas where market researchers and demographers have long gotten it wrong. Because if time is the luxury value proposition today, why are we segmenting our workers, our consumers, in 12 to 15-year age cohorts? It makes absolutely no sense. We have to reevaluate generations today every 2 to 3 years, such that your employees, we talk about maybe 5 or 6 generations in a workplace. We need to start thinking about 20 to 25 micro generations in a workplace, each with different feedback structures, different ways of communicating, different values and attitudes. So again, this appends so much that we know, but it is also leading to the creation of entirely new business efficiencies. So everything that we see happening from an artificial intelligence perspective, this is templosion. Now, the global AI market is expected to reach close to $179 billion by 2025. And due to AI, global GDP is expected to reach close to $16 trillion in the next decade alone. And we know that AI is changing and disintermediating so much of human labor. And it's happening across a spectrum, where the first node of this is the disintermediation of many manual types of labor. And the next node of that is cognitive labor. And that is just the beginning. But I am not here to scare you guys and say that robots and AI are coming for your jobs. That's absolutely not the case. It is just making us more efficient and smarter with what it is that we do. So a better way to think about artificial intelligence is augmented intelligence. It's augmenting human job functions such that, again, we are able to create entirely new marketplace efficiencies. And it's all about a symbiotic and collaborative relationship between humans and machines. It's not, we tend to pit humans and AI against each other as if we're in this rivalry, but it's all about the symbiotic relationship and the overlapping of this collaborative relationship. And it's making us more efficient, so such that we can perform tasks faster, more accurately, more consistently, and even at greater scale. And it's allowing us to act on insights from external data and user behavior. And it is augmenting every single sector. It is changing retail, e-commerce, finance, logistics, and supply chain management. So when we think of templosion and the whole notion of space, we need to rethink physical space as well, because our sense of these time-based boundaries is starting to change. We hear so much about the future of work and how it's going to be all around the hybridization of work. But how does that actually impact our physical environment? We're seeing massive changes to commerce. We are now used to shopping at all hours of the day. It doesn't matter what actual retail hours are, because we are seeing an explosion of e-commerce. And retailers are essentially just battling it out for access. It's all about access to consumers, regardless of those time-based boundaries. And education. I'm sure so many of you guys have kids, and you are battling this and grappling with this in the last year, is how do we balance in-person and hybridized learning? That's why wine sales and alcohol sales were through the roof. We're like, how do we even take care of our kids? And we also know that then learning in and of itself is not tied to time. It can happen at any time of day. And the same is true of office space. The boundaries between home and work are starting to blur, prompting us to rethink the whole notion of office space in the first place. So Templosion is also changing all of the industries that are poised for future growth. And I know these are areas that all of you are particularly interested in and that are really buoying the economy here. And the first is manufacturing. And that's why I always say, jobs in manufacturing are not going away. It's just how we employ the human mind very differently. And e-commerce is really driving a lot of the manufacturing growth. And it's very interesting because it is changing traditional models. It's a radical pivot from traditional B2B or B2B2C models because some are directly selling to consumers. We also see dramatic changes in supply chain and logistics. I remember we do about 24 of these kind of trend-based thought papers a year. And one of them years ago, we called Logistics is Sexy. And people were like, it is? And we're like, yes, this is going to be such an avenue for tremendous growth. And one of the things that it's doing, it's rethinking the entire built environment. Urban logistics is completely changing, and it's being transformed by everything from delivery services to smart digital technologies. And ultimately, it is the centerpiece of design. When we laid out our economic model about 15 years ago, we said that one of the major growth areas was going to be design and design-based thinking, and how that type of thinking was going to permeate all levels of the organization. Increasingly, the C-suite is that we all have to think like a designer. And supply chain management is becoming the centerpiece of design in everything from alignment to strategy to delivery and platforms. Healthcare, this is such a huge one, particularly from the aspect of data and data management, and technologies such as AI and even NLP, natural language programming, is enabling real-time, data-rich, secure delivery models. And clean energy, we're talking a bunch about clean energy. Prices are dropping precipitously as the expanding market enables economies of scale. Prices will continue to fall, and it's also creating healthier communities. The reduction of health burdens, reduce energy costs for families, increase quality of life. So what are some key takeaways here when we think about this notion of Templosion? What are some of the macro forces? The first is that we know that the world is becoming more boundaryless. So investment strategies will not be linear. No longer do we have the luxury of just thinking from A to B to B to C. And so many times I will ask audiences, how many of you are truly being innovative? And everyone will raise their hands. I'm like, but yet, why is no innovation actually happening? It's because we are straight line extrapolating based on what it is that we know instead of focusing more on imagination. And that becomes one of the critical things today in a world that is marked by boundarylessness. We also need to rethink outmoded metrics. So much of our work and how we think is still based on an industrialized economy. It is input, output, clock in at 8 a.m., leave by 6 p.m. But Templosion is upending all of this, and it's also leading to the compression of all of these traditional innovation cycles. I talk about time as one of the new luxuries. Quickly rising up along time are trust and truth. So there is a greater need to marry all three of these luxuries today, and a need for any business today to not just come from a place of transparency and authenticity, but honesty. Honesty, that is one of the critical things at a time, and I go back to what I said about boundarylessness, at a time that it is getting harder to differentiate between truthhoods and falsehoods. Future-proofing. We saw new urgency all around future-proofing, particularly because one of the biggest things that COVID exposed were the limitations of short-term thinking. Those that were in the most trouble were those that could not see their way out of this and could not see the opportunities at the end of all of this. And the light at the end of the tunnel, those that were just focused on short-term returns, are not poised for future growth. We also see a new emphasis on ethics, including ethical and sustainable supply chains. Younger generations, this is not a nice to have, this is a need to have. So for any of you looking to attract them as a consumer, ethics and sustainability are going to be two things that are critical for them. Alongside fairness, I talked a little bit about honesty, judgment, and the growth of conscious capitalism, embedding that ESG principles, environmental, social, and governance principles into every single thing that you do. Now, let's focus on us during our remaining time. We've talked a lot about where the economy is going, this whole notion of templosion, but what about labor? What about employment? What about the skill sets that are actually going to matter in the future? As I said before, I'm not up here to say that your job is going to go onto software and that we're going to be completely disintermediated by robots. That's not going to be the case. Humans have obviously a very critical role in this future. It's just that the role is going to change. So one of the things that we need to focus on, and this is true both from kind of an educational perspective and also a hiring perspective, we need to do away with smart. Smart has no place in this economy today. Why? Because it is based solely in industrialized era metrics. Smart is teaching to the test. Smart is based on rote memorization. And what is happening to Smart? Smart's going on to software. We are teaching our kids how to code. We're teaching them how to be bankers or lawyers. Those jobs, that's what's getting automated. And when I talk about the compression of generational change, we are building a generation today. When we talk about Gen Z, I call them cybrids, cyber hybrids. And I call them that because this is the first generation in history to not only have a truly symbiotic relationship with the technology that surrounds them, but this is the first generation in history to have different neural wiring. So we might think that they are nuts in some ways, but we're actually growing different brains. Their brains are different. So when you put them into a school system that was appropriate not just for my parents, not just appropriate for my grandparents, but my great-grandparents, we wonder why they can't pay attention, and we put them into siloed and hierarchical organizations. And if we know that the brains that we're growing are different because of technology, it's no wonder that they burn out after a handful of months. It's like putting a square peg in a round hole. And we try to change the brains, but yet we need to rethink our institutions and our organizations to not just hire around or educate for smart. It has to be around intelligence. And intelligence is all around critical thinking. It's analytical and critical thinking, and it's finding out the solution to a problem when you've never been faced with that problem before. We need to think our way out of the box. We need to create minds that can actually think differently, and these are the minds that are going to define the future, and these are the minds that are not going to be disintermediated by sophisticated technologies. We also talk so much about lifelong learning. Lifelong learning is great. I go back to the image I showed with all of the arrows going off in multiple directions. We all constantly need to reinvent what it is that we know and how we do what we do. But at the same time, we also have to get really comfortable abandoning all of that information, all of the stuff in our heads that is no longer useful or necessary for that future that we're moving into. And that's not comfortable for us because we pride ourselves on what it is that we know. But what we know is both one of our greatest assets and also one of our greatest liabilities. We also, and this is one of the silver linings of COVID, because I talk about the fact that input-based metrics are also largely industrialized. Why do I have to be in a physical space if I can get my best work done between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.? And this is one of the reasons that when people worked from home during COVID, productivity didn't decline. Because it was all about the shifting of metrics. It was all about reevaluating what mattered. What matters is output. Output. So do away with input and start thinking about how to get the best output out of your people. So one of the biggest things in all of this is how do you even future-proof human talent? One of the things that we know is that the future will comprise of entirely new jobs and jobs that we cannot even imagine today. I came across one recently, and it is an emoji expert. an emoji expert that comes to court cases and can decipher ambiguities in text messages that can lead to different outcomes in court cases. Who knew? And then I think of all of the amazing jobs from like a 3D printing space specialist or a virtual reality experience designer. All of these things that we have yet to even imagine. So the biggest question inherent in all of this is, how do you even create a future-ready and future-proofed workforce? And ultimately, how do we recruit, hire, and train for the jobs of tomorrow? Now, this is a little insight into my mind, and I started thinking to myself, we talk about skills and competencies as these weird one-offs and these things that we just wish they were. We want analytical and critical thinkers. We want people that have global sensitivities. We want adaptability. We want all these things. I'm like, okay, cool, but I couldn't make sense of all of this in my head. So this is how I made sense of it. So I created something, and I actually was taping together my son's like coloring pages. I took his crayons, and like a beautiful mind, I like wrote this thing out. And in my mind, this really encapsulates where the future from a skills and competencies perspective is moving. I'm a nerd. I love acronyms. So the competency tree, the 5 core branches, PLANT, plant, are purpose and passion, literacy, analytical and critical thinking, nimbleness, and trust. The trunk of the tree, that which anchors it into the ground, has to be human intelligence. If we don't start there, none of the rest of this even matters. Now, I'm not going to go through each one of these branches. I'm happy to make this slide available to you guys. As I've told some of my clients, take it, circle it, make your own drawings around it. One of the reasons that I created this as a tree is that it is not fixed. It is organic and biological in nature. It can grow different branches, but this ultimately is what matters. It is everything from sense making, asking why. I tend to think of my work as one big Venn diagram, the intersections between things. Ask yourselves, if I were to marry this technology with this sociocultural trend, or whatever it is, what would the world look like? Just ask why. And that goes into a sense of curiosity. And then just to note the 2 branches going off of trust. That is human to what I call non-carbon life form. So the non-carbon life form are all of those systems, those electronic entities that are imbued with some sort of human characteristics, whether it's the chatbots or software systems, those things that are increasingly getting hired alongside humans, and the sense of judgment and transparency. So how do we leverage this tree? In the few minutes that I have left, let's go through these few takeaways. The first is a sense of intergenerational learning. I talk about the fact that environments today, workplaces today, are going to be made up of dozens upon dozens of these different micro-generations. But in order to really get the future right, we have to stop talking about traditional mentorships. Tap into younger brains, these younger minds. Tap into, don't ask your kids, because they'll be like, get out of here. But ask a neighbor's kids, ask a niece or nephew. Tap into the youngest of these hybrid minds and ask them what matters to them. What platforms are they engaging in? How are they communicating with their friends? What type of job do they think that they might have in the future? Because they are a treasure trove of information, but yet we think that we have all the answers, but yet we have to actually rethink how it is that we learn. It's also changing traditional reward structures and feedback structures. Again, these younger generations are coming into a workplace where they are acculturated in a world of constant likes, constant feedback, and frankly, they don't even care if the feedback you give them is positive or negative. They just want it at all times. And this is uprooting so much of traditional culture. This is such a big one now as we think about organizational culture post-COVID. But one of the questions we have to ask ourselves is, how can an environment be created that not only builds flexibility and adaptability into it, but taps into human ingenuity in novel ways? Because it's not just about what I would call mankind today, it's about mindkind, how to harness minds collectively in completely new and imaginative ways. Now, one of the parts of the tree, because of course, during COVID, I was like, this tree doesn't seem complete. Let me create another acronym. So I created a root structure to underpin the tree. And this is going beyond just upskilling and reskilling, and HR loves to talk about these two things. And that is great, but it felt to me like something in that model was missing. So the underlying root structure is resiliency. Human resiliency. Look at all of us. We are effing resilient. Look at what we just went through. We cannot deny the power of human resiliency. And also outlook. How are we hiring people that just have their heads screwed on right, who have a good outlook and a realistic outlook as to where things are moving? A sense of objectivity. And that is one of the hardest parts of what it is that I do, because I can imbue all of these things with my own value judgments and get super galvanized by some things or think we're going to hell in a handbasket with other things. But we have to stay centered and leave all of our preconceived notions at the door and really view things through an objective lens. A sense of tenacity. And also just a sense of self-regulation, keeping some of those extreme emotions at bay and just viewing things again from an unbiased and realistic perspective. So that is the underlying part of the tree. Now, I'll end on this note. I love this visual, and it's the old adage of a diamond is merely a lump of coal that did well under pressure. And I love this because it really shows how you can take something like transformation, a transformation that all of us are going through, transformation of our social world, our economic world, our technological world, our demographic world, our environmental world, all of these things. And it's all about the creation of entirely new opportunities. So for all of you, I would just say in time when it's not just about innovation, but it is also about imagination, how do you take that lump of coal and turn it truly into a future-proof diamond? Thank you. Oh, and this is me.
Good morning. I am Shannon Peterson, Corporate Banking Manager with Nevada State Bank. Proud to be an LVGEA board member, and Nevada State Bank's honored to be a sponsor of this event this morning. As I sat here this morning, two things I already knew became even more evident. One, we live in an amazing community right now where very exciting opportunities are taking place. And two, I seriously need to step up my public speaking game. Geez, what an amazing job, Beau and Erica, you've done for us this morning, sharing this amazing insight for all of us community members and business owners here this morning. And speaking of public speaker and insight, I'm thrilled to introduce our last speaker for today's event, Mr. Jeremy Aguero. Jeremy is a principal with Applied Analysis, a leading economic, fiscal, and policy research firm. Is that God speaking to me? Like, your minute is up. He's performed countless economic and fiscal impact assessments for projects of local, regional, and national significance. He's also acted as lead staff for the Southern Nevada Tourism Infrastructure Committee, paving the way for our very own Allegiant Stadium and Convention Center expansion. Still going. He's very active in our community. He's taught hotel law and data for policy analysis as distinguished professor of practice at UNLV, and he currently serves on the advisory board for Nevada State Bank and the R&R Foundation board. Please join me in welcoming my friend and colleague, Mr. Jeremy Aguero.
You're going to have to forgive me. I just want to take it in for a minute because I got to tell you, I missed you guys a lot. It's wonderful to be here. Jonas, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We have a lot to cover in a relatively short time to get it done, so I'm going to jump into it. But I do want to express my thanks not only to the LVGEA, but for all of you for being here, and certainly to all the sponsors that made this event possible. Oh, let me go back for a second. I've entitled my presentation, What Comes Next? And so let me see if I can, there we go. And my presentation, What Comes Next? I had fully intended to not even say the word coronavirus as we were going through all of this. Guys, there we go. Now it went down, so hopefully you can see that as well. I had intended to not even mention this during my presentation. I just wanted to talk about where we were headed as a community and what we could expect on a go-forward basis. But given what we're dealing with as a community immediately and what we've seen in terms of media coverage and the like, it felt like it was imperative to go through this process. We have a dissension within our community and within our nation between the people that are vaccinated and the people that are not vaccinated. I will tell you that the anger that our community and that our nation seems to have is polarizing, and it's a problem for us all without any doubt whatsoever. I mean, to me, it almost seems Shakespearean, right? You have House Montague and you have House Capulet, right? Romeo and Juliet. We saw this fast forward with the Jets and the Sharks go forward. I realize not a whole lot of folks sort of understand that particular one. So, of course, you've got Kanye and Tay-Tay for our younger folks to understand all of that. And for those that don't believe that we can try and draw sides and that it can stem a truly emotional experience, I give you this one, right? Oh. Sorry, too soon. Apparently a little too soon. Okay, fair enough. So let's just take a look at where we are today. If we look at, the New York Times recently released an article that looked at what we had in terms of cases and serious cases of COVID-19 in 40 states where the data were reported. This is every 100 unvaccinated people throughout the United States. And for every 100,000 people, there are 1,182 hospitalizations. For those that are mathematically inclined, it's a little over 1% of the population. That little dot is the number of unvaccinated people for every 100,000 that are ending up in the hospital. We blow that dot. Oh, my slides just went back. Am I back? There we go. Thank you. For every, within that little dot, you've got the number of people that are dying of COVID-19 that are currently unvaccinated. If we jump forward and we look at the exact same chart among the people that are vaccinated, you cannot even see the little dot that's in that circle. 35 people out of every 100,000. And if we look at the deaths, it's even a smaller dot inside of the small dot that we get for every 100,000. So let's fast forward and let's look at the COVID-19 cases. Let's look at all of them. For every 100,000 COVID-19 cases, 4% of folks are fully vaccinated that are getting COVID-19 throughout the United States and here in the state of Nevada. For every 10,000 hospitalizations, it's 1.1% that are fully vaccinated. For every 100 deaths, it's 2% that are fully vaccinated. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the problem that we had a year ago. This is a completely different problem that we're dealing with, and one that is infinitely solvable. If you are vaccinated, if you are unvaccinated, you are 34 times more likely to be hospitalized and 16 times more likely to die. Right? This is the situation. This is the crisis that we are dealing with in our state and in our country today. And I would suggest to you that this challenge, this crisis, is infinitely solvable. Let's take a look for a moment at the COVID-19 crisis and the Delta variant. This is India, and this is the United Kingdom here. And if we look at how that Delta variant sort of came online, it burns hot and then it burns out. And if you look at it, it runs at about a 6-week stretch overall. Okay, that's fine. When the UK went through the Delta variant, it was at 38.4% vaccinated. When India went through it, it was 0.2%. And now we in the United States are going through the same thing at 47.3%. So let's take a look at the Delta variant's onset in Nevada and throughout the United States, and let's layer on the same 6 weeks overall, right? If the pattern runs itself out, and there are going to be variants, because that's how viruses work, right? We are going to have to deal with it and get past it overall. On the left-hand side is the United States. Growth in new cases, the change in new cases every day. The one on the right-hand side is for the state of Nevada. If you look at our averages and how we're rolling out, we actually appear to be peaking and coming back down the other side while the United States continues to go up. Well, that shouldn't come as a surprise at all. Why? Because the United States is not a single place, because we welcome 40 million visitors a year, simply underscoring the continued importance of getting every one of our hospitality frontline workers vaccinated as soon as possible to keep them safe, because we welcome people from all over the United States and all over the world. This is every state. Thank you. This is every state in the United States. And just to be clear, every state with a higher hospitalization rate has a lower vaccination rate. And every single state with a high vaccination rate has a lower hospitalization rate. The vaccine is working, and it is very clear relative to this. We have a divide in our country, and I'm not here to make any type of political commentary. I'm here to make an economic commentary. This is a solvable problem overall. This was in the Las Vegas Review-Journal this morning, right? School board meeting turns contentious over COVID-19 policies. I do want to just mention, our superintendent is here. The school district in Clark County was the first government in the state of Nevada to say you either have to be vaccinated or you have to get tested every single week to step foot in our schools. Congratulations. That took a great deal of bravery from you, superintendent, and your board, and I appreciate it. Right? But we look at this and we say, our country's going crazy. Look at everything that we're doing. We're so angry with each other and all of those type of things. But that's not it at all. Look at some of these ads. Masks are insanitary and useless. 4 weeks of muzzled misery. Say no to mandatory masks. All of those type of things. Right? These are all articles and the same pointing from 1918 when we were dealing with the last pandemic. This is not new. This is human nature. This is who we are. And if we look at the coronavirus and we look at all the other viruses that are out there, this is part of what we just have to live with. I like what Erica said about what it's taught us about time and the importance, right? If COVID-19 has given us anything, it's an appreciation for this community, for our life, and for time. But we have got to start working past it. So with that box checked, what then comes next? What can we expect on a go-forward basis? What happens when the stimulus funding starts to burn off? If we look at the legislation, we as a nation have passed $5.3 trillion worth of stimulus funding. This is an almost astronomical amount of money. Right? To imagine that $1 trillion is a million millions is almost mind-blowing in and of itself. And if we stop for a minute and think about how much of that is for each man, woman, and child in the United States, that's $16,000 per capita that we have seen generate. The cost of the legislation enacted is incredible, and we're going to talk more about that. Those direct payments to individuals are only 16.3% of all of the money that has been distributed overall, about $2,600 per capita when all three direct payments are identified and shown. So let's take a look for a minute at consumer income. Let's look at the personal savings rate on the left-hand side. Let's look at disposable income on the right-hand side. If we look at consumer income, we look at the savings rate, yes, our savings rate has gone up tremendously. The savings rate in the United States jumped all the way up during COVID-19 to almost 34%. Well, why is that? It's because we were giving everybody money and you can only buy so much toilet paper. Okay? That's it. That's the reality. And so people didn't have anything to spend on. And the stimulus wears down and it goes down and then we pass another one and it goes back up. But on the right-hand side, you see how personal disposable income has increased during COVID-19. Even here in the state of Nevada, total personal income growth on the far right-hand side is $25 billion year over year in our state alone. and take a look at all of the other years for the past 20 plus years. We don't get anywhere near that whatsoever. We saw during the CARES Act $19.5 billion, followed by the American Rescue Plan of almost $27 billion in new disposable income. So we're all feeling okay about taxable retail sales being up. And hey, it doesn't seem that bad. Yeah, because we've spent our way to prosperity, right? We've spent our way through the pandemic. These dollars are not going to last forever, and they're going to be a challenge. Let's look at how those stimulus dollars are being spent, right? The CARES Act on the left, the American Rescue Plan on the right. We'll just take a look at mortgage spending. 1 out of every $4 roughly being spent on a mortgage. The share of homes that have a negative home equity, if we're worried about it getting back to 2008, is only 1.9%. I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of people walking away from their home when they have huge amounts of home equity. At the same token, we've talked a lot about homeowners and renters all being in huge amounts of distress. For the past 3 quarters, we've actually seen the number of mortgages in default, either past due or in foreclosure, going down. Banks have handled it appropriately. Consumers have done the best that they can during a pandemic and are making payments where they can at an increasing, not decreasing clip. And what about rents? Talked a lot about rents and all of those type of things and folks that are going to be evicted from all of these homes. Let's take a look at that. There's no doubt that stimulus funding is still going to things like rent. And our cost of rent is escalating tremendously. To get a 2-bedroom apartment in Southern Nevada today, or in Nevada as a whole today, you have to make $20.50 an hour. And there's plenty of folks that don't do that, and that's a problem we are going to have to deal with in terms of affordable housing. But we've extended a national moratorium around evictions with 3.6 million people at risk. And that is a lot. But let's be clear, we have 300 million people living in the United States today. And if we look at Clark County and the filings by week, yes, there's no doubt that we saw increases in the number of eviction notices, eviction filings, all of those type of things. But is it astronomically high? No, it's not. And monthly eviction filings relative to the average, let's just take a look at that. Yes, they've increased. There's no doubt about that. So let's take a look at housing insecurity. What about the percentage of folks, the little blue line is the percentage of folks that didn't pay last month's rent. The one below that are the households likely to have to leave due to eviction. Now, I don't think anyone needs to be put on the street, and at least the clients that we have are suggesting to us that's not the problem that we're dealing with. We rent apartments. We want people to occupy our apartments. But we have almost 900,000 housing units in this community today, and we are creating policies that create some degree of instability as a result of trying to react to COVID-19 and its outcomes. These are things that I'm not saying are necessarily bad, but they are things we are going to have to address as we continue to move forward. In terms of the bottom line, the stimulus is going to burn off by the fall. We're going to start seeing it, so get ready. We saw the last 2 stimulus packages start to fall off. We are going to see this one. Pent-up capital and demand will carry us through probably all of 2020. There's a whole lot of money sitting on the shelf, and you can expect it to come in, and a bigger economic cliff is actually being created by our response policies today. At some point, the bill is going to come due. And right now, we're spending to make sure that we stay afloat. But at some point, we're going to have to pay that back. What happens when people start to go back to work? Let's just take a look at 3 statistics that I think are particularly important in this regard. The one on the left-hand side is the labor participation rate. This is how many people that are working age population that are participating in the workforce. You see prior to COVID-19, it was a little over 65%. You see that today, it's a little under 62%. Now, that may not seem like that big of a number. It equates to something between 50 and 60,000 employees if you want to think about it that way. So let's jump to the next one, the unemployment rate. And let's imagine that those 50 or 60,000 employees that are just sitting on the sidelines, that have exited the workforce altogether, were to be back in the workforce and were to be employed. Where would our unemployment rate be? Roughly 5%, right where it was when the economy was humming along. And what about those continued unemployment insurance claims? They went up tremendously. They've come down. You can see where they are on the right-hand side. They're hovering at about 50,000. Right? Let's just imagine we cut that number in half. we would be right where we were prior to that. The federal pandemic unemployment insurance ends on September 6th, and I'm going to imagine a fair number of those folks are going to re-enter the workforce. Let's look at establishment-based employment overall. Where are we in this community? In total, we lost 289,000 jobs during COVID-19. We were hit harder than anywhere else in the entire United States. That's 27.1% of our workforce was lost from the high point of our employment to the low point of the crisis. Today, we've added back about 176,000 of those jobs. We have about 113,000 still to add back. And so you're asking yourselves, I have all these open, we have this high unemployment, why? Why can't I get folks to come back out? I think these reasons are relatively self-evident, and you're not alone. There are 113,000 jobs that have yet to come back to our community. That isn't to say that we're not creating jobs. To be clear, we are. In the past year, we've created almost 108,000 jobs, and that is a feat and something this community should be very proud of. Led by our core leisure and hospitality, thank you. And thank you to the LVGEA, by the way, right? If we look at it, led by our core leisure and hospitality, almost every single sector of our economy, save government, which obviously operates on a little bit of a different timeline, has added back new jobs over the past 12 months. And what has that meant for us? It has meant dropping our unemployment rate from a nation-leading and historic level of 33.3% down to 9.6%. And let's look at this even a different way. This is employment growth in the largest 30 MSAs in the United States. The one on the far right, the one that I've highlighted in yellow, and the one that I'm still going to talk to you about is this community that is leading the nation in adding jobs back. And I think that's something we should be very, very proud of. This isn't to say that the recovery has been symmetrical, because it has not. It has not been symmetrical, right? We know that there are many folks that are still struggling to find their footing back in the economy that's here today. We know that it's different for folks that don't have the same level of education. We know it's more difficult. It's been more difficult for some minorities. We know that it's been difficult for some younger workers. Right? These are not the challenges necessarily with COVID-19. These are the structural challenges in our community that did not go away during COVID-19. They are just made worse by the fact that some jobs simply aren't coming back. To go full circle here, these are job openings in the United States versus the people that are unemployed. So you can see the unemployed is the little blue line. You can see the job openings is the little yellow or gold line at the bottom. Okay, I get it. There's a few more unemployed people than there are job openings. But let's dig just a little bit more into this particular statistic. Let's look at job openings versus people that actually want a job now, like my brother-in-law, right? Right, you get it, right? If you look at how that has changed over here, all of a sudden, those two lines are flipped the other way, right? I'm unemployed, but I don't necessarily want a job now. Maybe I can get one next month. What do you got in early 22? So let's look at this one. Layoffs and discharges versus quits. The little orange line are the layoffs and discharges. It's how many people are being separated from their work. The other ones are ones that people are just saying, I quit. And you'll see that the number of quits is actually substantially higher than the number of people that are being displaced. And so we're experiencing a labor shortage. That's true. Right? We're also experiencing a reassessment of whether people want to work. When asked about their current outlook in terms of finding a job, about 50% of folks were pretty pessimistic about finding not only a job, but the right job. And the one on the right-hand side of your screen is the one that I think is worthy of at least our consideration. Are you seriously considering changing occupation or field of work? I'm done. I want to go try something else, because you know the grass is always greener on the other side. 5.7 million employees, about 4.1% of the workforce, are currently work at home. 82% of employees would love to work at least some at home, and flexibility is among the most important element to younger workers today. I get it, but that may or may not be where the jobs are. And we've conditioned folks right? We sent everybody home because of COVID-19. It was the end of the world. We're bringing everybody back because COVID-19 is over. It's the end of the world. The reality is people don't like change a whole lot. But we're going to have to get back to some kind of normal, because what's the bottom line? Workers will go back over the next year. As a matter of fact, I think in the third and fourth quarter, you will see a substantial increase in the number of people who work. But some jobs will no longer exist. I think Erica had it exactly right. We're going to change. It's going to be different than it was before. This is not something that changed during COVID-19 and something we're still not ready to do. What happens when schools open back up? I mean, other than parents going nuts and being glad, because as my grandfather used to tell me, we're all suffering from a bit of acute too much togetherness here in Southern Nevada, right? Actually, these parents are dancing because their kids are going back to school. The kids just know they get to go get ice cream. But all the same, you get the idea, right? We have a cumulative learning curve that we have got to overcome. I know the superintendent is with us today. I know he has been dedicated to this proposition of making up for lost time and trying to do everything he can to help students continue to learn under difficult circumstances. And I am so happy that our kids are physically back in school. But we cannot avoid the realities that all kids didn't have the same opportunities during COVID-19. And if you look at the learning gap, it is different for different cohorts of students, and that's going to be a problem for us. And ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest to you it is something greater than just the learning gap. If we look at how hard COVID-19 has been on our young people, we look at the increased incidence of drug abuse and alcoholism and those type of things, even among our youngest folks in this community, our school-aged kids having problems. And we ask them about their mental health. You can see the differential pre-pandemic to post-pandemic in a number of these things. We cannot turn a blind eye to how hard this has been, not only on our families, not only on our governments, not only on our businesses, but on our children. We say we soldier up, we're going to carry through, we're going to get to the other side. What they really need to hear is, this sucks. It's terrible. I'm sorry that you missed that baseball game. I'm sorry that you missed that graduation. I'm sorry that you missed that birthday party. I'm going to do everything I can to make it better, but I can't just make a magic wand. We as a community are going to need to rally around these children, and we are going to have to do a better job relative to mental health in this community. If we look at... Right? I'm also impressed by this statistic, so I wanted to put it on the screen as well. 12 CCSD campuses will offer full-time distance learning as an option. Obviously, they're making it access for everyone, and we're going to have some bumps along the road as we go. But only 5% of students registered for online. That is not a material amount. That means 95% of parents and students believed in the system that we have and how we educate our students and wanted to put them back there. The next problem we're going to deal with, because our state legislature, our governor, and the other folks that are here did a good job in terms of finding additional money for the first time, funding education at a higher level and in both capital and operations. But it does not change the reality that we have some of the most crowded classrooms anywhere in the country. Give teachers the opportunity to succeed. Give students the opportunity to succeed. And if they are the most crowded classrooms in the country, particularly in our high schools, good luck to all of those folks. What is the bottom line? We have a significant learning gap to overcome, and certainly these impacts will last a generation. The idea that we're somehow going to overcome COVID-19 from all sides over the next 6 months or in this school year is to turn a blind eye to reality. What happens next when interest rates start to rise? And I promise you, interest rates are going to start to rise. For the folks that got the Capulets, got the Sharks, got the whole West Side Story joke, you'll remember, right, the 14% interest rates that we had, sort of that Carter administration rolling over to the Reagan administration. It was remarkable in terms of where we were. Expect interest rates to start to increase in 2023. And why is that? Is because you do not get to just print money without having an inflationary impact. So let's be clear. This is United States money stock in the United States. This is the change each period within that money stock. Every year, 20% of all U.S. dollars were printed in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a problem, right, that we are going to have to deal with. Are we in the midst of another great inflation? I don't think so. Yes, inflation is running up, but it doesn't look like anything. And we don't spend our money the same way we did during the 70s and the early 80s. Yes, our inflation is higher. Yes, it's at 5.4%. That's a 13-year high, and it does keep me up at night. But when you ask me that question about whether or not I believe it is transitory, I believe that it is because we spend our money differently. But we've got a second problem we have to deal with. You know, when we think about the fact that we have printed all this money and we've given all this money to everyone, I would think to myself, well, okay, we're doing all of that, but then we shouldn't be taking on additional debt, right? We were doing that and not taking on additional debt. Boy, would I be wrong relative to that, right? We all know the federal debt on the far left-hand side, $28.1 trillion. That's a massive number to consider. Right? Then you've got non-financial corporate debt. That's business debt that exists everywhere. And then you've got household nonprofit debt, securities, and loans, which is how much all the households own. All of them at peak levels. And major banks indicating that they have held $1 trillion in unused corporate credit. I'm not suggesting that credit shouldn't go out. Of course it should. Interest rates are low. We should be investing like crazy. I would certainly encourage everyone to do that. But we have to be mindful of the aggregate amount of the debt and everything that we're doing to our economy, because at some point, when we all look at these numbers and we say, I wonder what happens when you put that much money into the economy. I wonder what happens when you change it. Right? We kind of get it. Interest rates are going to increase. That is going to make things more expensive. And the number one thing it's going to make more expensive, you got it. What happens when the housing market returns to normal? Let's look at U.S. mortgage interest rates at remarkably low levels. Again, if you haven't refinanced your house, ladies and gentlemen, now's the time to go do it, right? Because these rates are the lowest we have ever seen. In addition to that, we have a serious supply-side problem in Southern Nevada. MLS listings are showing you. This is how many homes are available for sale by realtors on the multiple listing system. You see what it looked like during the housing boom. You see what it looks like today. It is infinitesimally small. What if we convert that into effective inventory? How many homes we're selling versus how many homes are available? Maybe we're just selling few of them. Nope. We have back then we had 21 months of effective inventory. Today we have just over 1/2 of 1 month's inventory of homes available for sale. The average over the past decade is 2.3 months. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a problem. Home closings overall, let's just take a look at them. What they looked at like before, what they look like now. Let's take a look at median home prices, which are obviously at the highest levels we have seen ever, right, in terms of where housing prices are. Let's look at median closing price growth. On the far right-hand side, for existing homes, they're up 14.1%. Double-digit over double-digit growth rates, probably not sustainable in our community overall. And what about the share that are going to cash buyers? It's escalating again. 31% of homes are going to cash buyers. Those under $300,000 are a little lower, 25 roughly 0.5%. Okay, those numbers are not out of line, but if we continue along this track, it is going to be a major problem for us overall. Why? Because consumers are still coming in. They're choosing our community. In 2021, we saw substantial in-migration from California, bringing huge amounts of home equity, and they now account for 4 out of every 10 newcomers and probably a fair number of people sitting in this room. And to address that supply-side problem, let's take a look when we were going through the housing boom, how many housing units we were building and how many housing units we're building now. In the 3 years leading up to the housing crisis, we constructed 83,000 housing units, plus or minus. In the last 3 years, we have constructed about 30,000 housing units overall. When we think about the housing market, low interest rates are pulling demand forward. That's going to create a challenge for us. We are experiencing strong migration and a huge amount of home equity from California into our market, which is essentially gobbling up the supply that they have because they're willing to pay more because it's so much less expensive. And current price appreciation simply not sustainable. What happens then, if we're not going to talk about the residential side of the world, what happens when this community starts to run out of industrial land? Right? Let's just take a look at the commercial market absorption that we have seen in this community for the past 3 years. Office on the left, retail in the middle, industrial on the right-hand side. You get the punchline here. It's almost all been industrial. And let's look at who the folks that are building and occupying the greatest amount of that industrial space are. And I'm not saying they're the only ones, but they're the ones that we identify with economic development and diversification, and who we think about ourselves as a community, or at least where we ultimately want to go. Right? We are incredibly competitive from an industrial standpoint, which means we have to have the ability to continue to build industrial space. There are 37 projects and 20 million square feet in the development pipeline. But this is the industrial land that is currently developed in the Las Vegas Valley. This is how much we have left. That is a problem. We are going to have to end. Before I have my commercial real estate friends lose their mind, I realize not all of this is developable, not all of it has utilities added, not all of it is at grade, but nonetheless, it puts it in terms of order of magnitude relative to what we have left. Obviously, getting access to Apex and the 12-mile new water line that's going to connect that will open up a substantial amount of opportunity. The first of the major industrial parks going into there is Vantage North, 350 acres, 4.6 million square feet. But we need to be thinking 5 years from now or 10 years from now because, ladies and gentlemen, we are running out of industrial space, and that will hamstring our ability to diversify as an economy overall. Again, land availability is critical to our ability to grow. Access to land will be increasingly limited, means prices are going to go up, and it's going to be more difficult for us to achieve our goals from an economic development standpoint. What happens when we reach 3 million total residents in the urban valley? That's going to happen about 2035, we believe. You saw the data came out yesterday from the United States Census showing that we are among the fastest growing metropolitan areas anywhere in the United States. How fast are we growing? 139 people per day, or 5.8 people every hour are moving into our community. Not bad. Most of them don't know how to drive, so if they can please take a course or figure out where the address is, would be terrific for me. I'm really glad you're here. I'm really glad you're here. I love newcomers. I'm not here to be pejorative in any way, shape, or form, but for the love of God, use Google and get an address, right? Population metrics are continuing to show a rise overall. On the left-hand side, driver's license surrenders. On the right-hand side, electric meter connections. And you can see that they are consistently rising. Now, obviously, driver's license surrenders are going to be lower because the DMV was closed, right? That's how it works. You can't surrender a driver's license when it's closed. So we look at those electric meter connections on the other side of that. Land availability, utilities, classroom sizes, roadways, and transportation all are going to press this community forward. The bottom line is very simple in this regard. These new residents are coming. We're either going to be prepared for them or we are going to be dealing with the ramifications of growth outstripping the capacity that we have in the community. What happens when all of the visitors start coming back? What does that mean? This is who we used to be. This is what Las Vegas used to look like. This is who we are today, a modern tourism economy that is incredible in all ways. And I don't know the answer to this question. I don't know who we will ultimately be. But I know it better be consumer-centric. I know we better start being very thankful for the fact that 40 million people get on a plane or get in a car and come here. And we better find out how to give them the best experience of their life. Because we've invested a remarkable amount, billions upon billions of dollars to build 148,000 hotel rooms and 14 million square feet of meeting and exhibit space, more than anywhere else in the United States today. And yes, we are number one entertainment capital of the world and trade show destination and all of those type of things. All of these are things that we have been. What are we going to be next? Because the greatest thing that Las Vegas has been able to do is adapt and climb and proceed. And are we ready to do that as a community? Visitors are ready to come back. We already know that. Percent of Americans who will travel for leisure in the next 3 months is now 77%. And maybe it'll be affected by the Delta variant some way or another, but that will pass over time. And we are continuing to invest in things like the MSG Sphere, providing remarkable experiences. And we have seating capacity for 295,000 people all on the same day, right here in Southern Nevada, and we can pack it like nobody else. You want your event to be packed, host it here. I went to the opening of Allegiant Stadium, the way that I think about it, when Garth Brooks was there. And I saw 60,000 people having the time of their life. And I wasn't there for the CONCACAF Gold Cup, but I saw the videos, and that was a party that I wish that I would have made it to, because they looked like they were having a great time. And that's what Las Vegas is all about. Because what are the biggest events that we have not yet had in this community? These are just a few of them, and I can't wait till we host a Super Bowl. I want the Olympics here. I'm looking for the FIFA World Cup, and I'm not going to be done until we get all of these, right? I want the Tour de France. I want Wimbledon. And I know I'm never going to get to go to the Masters, so we might as well bring it here, right? What's the bottom line? We are an experiential economy. What is the experience that we are giving to visitors? Visitors have already demonstrated that they will return, but delivering on our brand is what is going to keep them coming back. International travel is going to be a struggle. Our economy is not designed to operate at 80% of its capacity. And right now, our tourism community is making hay while the sun is shining, because all of that stimulus dollars, all the stimulus dollars are floating around the United States, and we cannot turn a blind eye to the fact that we are benefiting disproportionately from that. We're setting records for gross gaming revenue with not a single whale being in Las Vegas from any place outside of the United States. Not sustainable, and we've got to be ready for the transition to normal. And finally, what happens when we deal with the next crisis? Right? It's been said a few times today, right? This community has demonstrated, and I've said it time and time again, has demonstrated itself to be resilient and resourceful. But being resilient is not a replacement for preparation. It's not a replacement for investment. We have all benefited in this community because of the people that came before us and left a community where each and every one of us has had the benefit to prosper. We have the same responsibility to our kids and their kids. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
All right, friends. I told you we had a powerhouse lineup of speakers. Was that not true? Can we give them one big round of applause? So I want to leave you with one final powerful message. We are moving from resilient to unstoppable. It's happening, and we are doing it together as one community. You can see that throughout our presentations. You can see it throughout our work at LVGEA. This is happening together thanks to so many groups that need to be recognized. Thanks to the leadership of Michael Brown and the team at GoEd, leading the way on economic development. Our city partners, our county, Clark County, all driving the charge on economic development. Thank you. Many of you are here. Higher education, K through 12. How about a shout out to Governor Sisolak, our state legislature, the business community, everybody coming together. This is one big team. The only way we move from resilient to unstoppable is together. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our speakers, and a huge thank you to the Perspective Council. I hope you get some great takeaways today, and we look forward to seeing you soon.